Absolutely. Yeah. I wanted to add to that, if you don't mind. The other thing that's really interesting is when they summarize, they're summarizing with their pre-recorded 30-second elevator pitch that they've put into their head. And if credibility is the quality in which you're trusted, known, and liked, if you're speaking from your head, how can somebody get to know you? How can they feel you? How could they trust you? How they get to know you? How could they like you? They can't.
And welcome back to the Money, the Mindset, the Mentoring podcast. Today, we are going to talk about one of the most important things that's going to matter to you in 2025. If you run a business, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a salesperson, if you're a marketer, if you got anything that you want to promote right now, one of the most important things that you need to focus on is your credibility. Credibility is so dominant. We look at AI right now. We've got a lot of synthetic version. Hey, man, I'm guilty as charged. I have 4 synthetic podcasts out there that are not me talking, but it's my data talking through my voice. So, but credibility is one of those things that's really, really important for you to be able to build out so that you can build your massive businesses together. So Mitchell Levy, thank you so much for joining us today as we're talking about being seen and being heard and how important that is. So let's get it going.
Hey, Steve. Thanks for having me. Levy, by the way, and thanks for having me.
Hey, man, no worries. You know, I've got one of those funny last names. It's Hamoon, Hamoin, Hamden. I don't even know personally how to say my last name. And so I usually have other people correct me on how to do that. So, you know, in a world where we have like deep fakes, we've got digital overload, we've got credibility problems. How does somebody stand out as a leader that people trust?
You know, at the end of the day, credibility, the definition, is a quality in which you're trusted, known, and liked. So how can you be trusted? Well, people actually need to see you, understand you. They need to know who you are. And what's really important is they need to like you. You can't do that with AI.
Yeah, I mean, you know, AI certainly is a personality. I think AI is not a piece of software. It's a personality. It's something that you have to have a relationship with. But that being said, it is a piece of code and it's not an individual. It's about how the code has been presented. And I do very much stand behind the idea of using AI in your business, whether it's from a front end agent that answers the phone or a product that creates wonderful pieces of virtual content that go out. It's all about how you do actually present that is what's really important. And I think the idea that you're presenting it as not actually being AI, that's where it's disingenuous. And I think that's where people go astray with AI.
There are definitely times to use it. I get a call every now and then from somebody that said, this is so-and-so's AI. Can I ask you a question? Now, the thing is, I don't even know if I want to talk to so-and-so. I certainly don't want to talk to so-and-so's AI, but at least they're upfront on it. So it made me feel comfortable.
You know, I felt that way at the beginning first. What I found is that it's just like when you hire an employee. Is a lot of times when people call you and you have an admin who answers the phone, the first time they call, they don't want to talk to the admin. They just want to talk to you. But when they realize that the admin can help get the job done faster than you can, they're going to enjoy talking to that admin again and probably more than you. And the same thing applies when it's the application of AI. If the AI can get the job done in what they're looking at doing and they're task oriented and they're looking for the outcome and it gets them the outcome that they're looking for, then I think they're going to be more apt to be able to have that conversation with that piece of software.
So, Steve, I'm going to say, let me do the yes and for that one. In this particular case, if credibility is the quality in which you're trusted, known, and liked, that person has not yet developed the trust. So you've made my mind change. Next time I get opportunity to play with somebody else's AI, I will, because I'll see if it happens quicker. But in order for me to want to say yes in the first place, I need to trust the person.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, that's where having that process for building out trust, you know, is so critically important. I mean, that's why I do the podcast, is that I'm able to go out and really have people get to know who I am from this one-on-one kind of interaction. So they can see how I have conversations with other people. They can see how I reconcile different ideas and concepts, and they can get to know me on that basis. So when they talk to me in person, they're like, oh, you kind of are like the same person. I'm like, yeah, but just better looking in person. And
I don't
I'm
know.
trying
I
to
got to
change my
see in
branding.
person to make that judgment. Okay.
But the idea is I'm the same person, whether it's who I am here or who I'm there. So when we're looking at creating that brand, one thing about a brand is that consistency. So I think Donald Miller, the guy who wrote Story Brand, he said clarity is the first step to credibility. If you confuse, you lose. What's your thoughts on that?
Oh, well, as a clarity guy, I'm going to say absolutely. The interesting part, in order for somebody to trust you, they have to understand the container you play in. And if you can articulate who you are and how you play and how you're a servant leader, all things which are credible. If you could do that in less than 10 words, you could do that in seconds. All of a sudden, the person gets really interested in going, huh, I'm interested in this as either a referral partner or a prospect. Tell me more.
Yeah, I think, too many times people get stuck up in the mire of you ask them to summarize what they do in a sentence and they give you a paragraph, and that becomes very difficult because then you get confused, and anybody who's confused just doesn't move. I mean, you
Well,
look at
Steve, let me
a deer, when a deer sees a threat, they just stop.
absolutely. Yeah, I wanted to add to that if you don't mind. The other thing that's really interesting is when they summarize, they're summarizing with their pre recorded 30-second elevator pitch that they've put into their head. And if credibility is the quality in which you're trusted, known, and liked, if you're speaking from your head, how can somebody get to know you? How can they feel you? How could they trust you? How they get to know you? How could they like you? They can't.
So let's repackage that then. If somebody says, because I do agree with that 100%. I think a lot of people, especially if you're somebody like me, a numbers guy, you think that you make every decision logically, but that's actually fallacious. Most decisions that people make are emotional, but then they back it up with a logical statement. And so the emotion is the thing that leads. So if we're going to repackage the idea around starting to define who we are by our head, but more about coming it from the heart, how does one do that?
So I have a formula for clarity. I call it a CPOP. It's your customer point of possibilities. And the short component of it, it is, if you are a credible human, it is who you serve. And then from their perspective, their pain point or their pleasure point.
So let's go through that again. So we've got, it's break it one more time.
Yeah. So here's what a CPOP, customer point of possibilities. If you're thinking about the audience, who do you serve in as narrow of a statement as you can, 1, 2, or 3 words, who is the audience that you serve? And that's how you start the conversation. When somebody says, who are you? What do you do? You start with your CPOP. You start with who you serve. And then from their perspective, their pleasure point or their pain point. So give you an example. As an executive coach, my CPOP is 9 words long. Inc. 5,000 CEOs leading the future with executive abundance. Now notice what I've done is put a pause between the beginning and end. If people don't know what the word CPOP is, then you need to do something in a different way. You lead with a hook. Steve, we had a conversation talking about a hook. So what's the hook? Somebody says, who are you? You know, there's a series of customers that get a lot of benefit from me. Pause. Inc. 5,000 CEOs leading the future with executive abundance. Drop the mic. Now, here's what's interesting. The person on the other side can be one of 3 people. They could be a potential referral partner. They could be a prospect, or they could be somebody who doesn't care. I normally say doesn't give a shit. And what's interesting is if they are a prospect or a referral partner, they are bound to ask you the next question. Tell me more. Now, the tell me more could be, hey, why Inc. 5,000? Somebody actually said to me, Mitchell, so you're limiting your audience to 5,000 CEOs? I'm like, duh, I got it. Or they might actually say, what do you mean executive abundance? Anything that represents a tell me more, when you now respond, you're responding in a container of credibility because you've so narrowed in the focus of who you are and how you show up. It is incredible.
So the idea is, and I do agree that I think when you're trying to propose who you serve, you got to be very discreet, and because you can't be everything to everybody. It's just not going to happen. I know I'm doing well when there's people that don't like me because I know there's a lot of them out there, and so I know that I'm winning the attention game. I'm getting a lot of people who don't like me, and hopefully at least half a dozen who do. But I'm really really honing in on the idea of those half a dozen people. It's like I was told once, when you're doing a speech and you're speaking in front of, say, 1,000 people. I did that, I think, like a few weeks ago, and you're speaking in front of 1,000 people. You're speaking in front of 1,000 people, but you're speaking to 100 people, and you're speaking deeply to 5. And if
I
you
was going to
orient
pick one,
around,
but 5 sounds good. Yeah.
yeah, why don't we say 10? We'll just 10x it. And so we've got, you're speaking to 10. And so you've got that idea that your message is very focused and purposeful. And I agree that the idea is you've got to hone in on number one, pain, because most people, a decision, whenever when you focus on something, most decisions are pain driven. Number one is, this element is hot that my hand is on. I am going to remove my hand off the element. I'm not going to say like, what temperature is it at? I'm just going to take my hand away. I'm going to remove the pain. The second thing is opportunity. They're going to say, well, okay, my hand's away from there. Now, can I, cook up some bacon or something instead? And now I've got the opportunity to, enjoy some bacon. And so the idea is pain first and opportunity second.
So I'm gonna say yes, and 80% of the time you're absolutely right. However, if your audience that you address happens to be an audience like CEOs whose egos are so high and will never publicly admit pain, you want to start with pleasure first, and then tell me more, incorporate the pain. So I'll give you an example. So I'm going back to the CEO example. If I actually say fast growing companies or Inc. 5000 companies leading the future with executive abundance, and the CEO says to me, what do you mean? I'm going to immediately see something. Well, most CEOs, what do? They actually focus on shareholders or investors, but they're missing out on the other 4 stakeholder groups. Clearly customers, employees, community, and probably the most important, how many CEOs do you know that's gotten divorced because they haven't focused on their family or themselves? And then you bring in, and particularly if I know who I'm talking to and I talk to ahead of time, I'm going to focus on one of those other 4 stakeholder groups besides shareholders and investors that I actually know they had pain on. And I'm not going to say you have pain on this, but I'm going to say, what if you were able to address that up front?
Yeah,
right. So anyhow, that's the way I do that one.
Yeah. And what if Marvel really doubled down on that when they came up with their little what if series? But the idea is, what if is such an important way to look at things, because a lot of people say, is I can't do this. Well, what if you could? So that it's an interesting way to kind of promote the idea of a conversation around something where immediately egos, because I know with adult learning, it's the first thing that we learn in an adult learning course is the content doesn't matter. It's the ability for the audience to be receptive to the content that matters. And when you're doing adult learning, you have to break down all their barriers of learning first. And then you got to break them down a second time, then a third time, and then finally they're ready to learn. And so a lot of times it takes the breaking of the barrier first to be able to get them actually into the position that are able to even absorb the content, let alone implement it.
Steve, I'm gonna double down on what you just said, since that actually, what if it's one of my favorite things. Let me double down for a second. 23 brought a transformation to the world. Many people haven't figured that out yet. But once we started using AI effectively, 2023 made thought leadership ubiquitous. I'll say it again, thought leadership is now ubiquitous. So content doesn't matter because you can so easily get content created. What matters is exactly what you said. It's about the relationship. So whether it's a half-hour Zoom call, whether it's a group call where you're together, whether it's doing a podcast and it's the pre-interview, it's building a relationship and rapport with the person you're interacting with so that they can become a referral partner or a prospect.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I think, I think it was James Clear, the guy who wrote Atomic Habits. He wrote the idea that trust is built in drops and it's lost in buckets. What do you think?
So the answer is, so I want to generically say yes, right? Because it is true that we absolutely can lose trust faster. And the way we build trust is the continual focus on doing everything consistently and doing it well. So by that definition, you're absolutely right. What I often get asked the question is, hey, Mitchell, I've done something bad. I've lost trust. I'm never going to get it back. And the answer is no, that's not true. It just will be harder. And once again, how do you build it back? You build it back with drops.
Yeah. And that's where it comes to. It doesn't have to be this big magnitude moment that, the world is shifted based on those last 3 sentences you just laid out like butter on a piece of bread. It more is, the little drip here, the little drip there, the little piece here, the little piece there. And that's why, when people look at social media, And in this digital world, the idea is that it's how do you present on your Instagram? How do you present on your LinkedIn? How do you present on your YouTube? Are you on podcasts? Are you, the best kept story that nobody's ever heard about? And, are you all of these things? And as these drops go out, I had this happen actually. It was interesting. It was yesterday. I had a lady who reached out to me. I just posted this little thing about guess where I am and I'll send you a coffee thing or whatever. And this lady responded back and said, "Oh, you're here, such and such." And do you know when the last time I spoke with her was?
A little while ago.
30 some years ago. Probably
Oh,
35 years ago
I've been
is the last time
following
I
you
spoke
for
with her.
that long in a lurker type approach.
She's been following that as just celebrating the journey approach. And
Nice.
she's
Nice.
just one of those people that like she loves people. She loves celebrating other people. She's got just such an abundant heart. And she always has in the past. And then, just to kind of see that she's still the same loving person that she was back then, it was just a joy to see that. And it really moved me because I was like, she said to me, she said, "It's been so awesome to see the success that you're finding for yourself." And just to watch that. And it was like, man, like that feels really cool. And that was just, it was awesome. But it was like those drips of little trust building, those drips of little things allows that relationship to kind of keep on going on a one-to-many or a one-to-one and on a mass basis. Even though you might not have talked to that person in 35 years, they're still connected to you.
But Steve, what you did do is you went out of your way to make sure you had that one-to-one, right? And by the way, that's why I wear the hat. 8 years ago, my wife and I were spending 4 weeks in Paris. She walks into my office one day and says, "Honey, we're not going to be one of those stupid Americans that wear a baseball cap in Paris." I'm like, okay. She was holding a fedora. I tried to unsuccessfully argue with her. And what ended up happening, I wore it. I started posting it on Facebook. And 3 days into it, I got so many people who absolutely commented. And I use the word lurker not in a negative way. People who hadn't heard from in a number of years who said, "Mitchell, I love the hat." That within 3 days, I'm like, oh, because this brought out, like you, where am I? This brought out people who have been following me but don't normally comment. And it was so, what's right? It feels really good when you know there are people watching you, and maybe this is not so good, but when people are watching you in a positive way and they occasionally applaud, it really feels comfortable.
Well, whether you like it or not, people are watching you. I mean, this when you have kids. I have three amazing kids. And when you think they're not paying attention, that's when they're paying attention the most. And when you want them to pay attention, that's probably when they're paying attention the least. And that goes, with society as in general. I mean, everything that you're going to do is leaving a legacy of who you are, and you're leaving clues as to your personality. And I think that's the one thing when I look at the idea of that trust comes in drops, is every little thing that you do is a drip in a bucket to say who you are.
You mentioned a fun word, legacy. Legacy, if I'm going to define that, is what people say about you when you're not in a room. It's not the plaque on the wall. It's what do they say about you when you're not in a room? It's part of have you contributed to them as they get to know you? Do they actually like you? Do they share you? Do they share you because you're the one of all the podcasters out there that you want to be on their show? You're the one that you add so much value to people. By the way, the answer is yes. But that's what legacy means, that people talk about you. In a green room, what did I do? I talked about you. I talked about your brother. I said, "Hey, tell me, are there any other brothers in the family? What are they doing? Because I'm curious."
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's legacy.
Yeah. And I think that's exciting. And I think that's one of the reasons why having a family is so important, because that legacy exists when you're not there anymore. And that when people are talking about you, you're hoping that they're talking about your next generation's generation. And I think that is so super exciting. And again, it has nothing to do with wealth or status or, anything like that. I think, the most important thing has to do with impact. And I think the impact you can create, whether it's on a one-to-one basis or it's on a global level, I think the impact is what creates legacy.
So I want to say, Steve, one thing that's important. You mentioned the word people talking about you. Now, it could be because you did a good job. It could also be because you used the CPOP. If you can actually articulate who you serve and how you serve them, or what you're serving, pain or pleasure, in less than 10 words, it becomes a compass. It's a compass for you to act, changes everything. It also, if you can magnetize that compass, if you can make sure people know it, see it, understand it, it is 10 words are so much easier. There are many CPOPs that are 3, 4, 5, 6 words. It is so much easier to remember. It's so much easier to share. It's so much easier for other people to share your legacy.
Yeah, and I would say mine would be somewhere along the lines of I help people who think they really are great at grappling realize the power of jujitsu by choking the hell out of them.
Dude, we will at some point in time, we do it on the air or we'll do it separately. I'm happy to share and work with you on your CPOP.
Yeah.
That's not it, but that's a fun one.
Yeah, I think it's my favorite one. But yeah, no, I think that's important. And I think, one of the things that people need to understand is how do you take that from a principles-based approach into a practical approach and apply it. And I think when you look at the practical approach, it's okay, well, great. I now know who I am and how I present myself. And I think that is important. But then it's like, how do I take that into action? And I firmly believe in systems and models. And I think that I was just on a podcast a little while ago and we really were discovering the idea of what it takes to get somebody into the process of action. And it really was take away the decision-making process and just implement a system. Because if you take away the decision-making process and you just follow a system, being in service of that system, you're setting yourself free. Whereas if you're always making a decision, that creates a moment of chaos and then you don't actually move forward. And so if somebody's actually going to take this and then say, okay, great, I've got this. Now I've got to apply it into a methodology of saying what's a good system that they could use to be able to start creating a framework for success for like a viral habit that they can do to create their model, say, for example, on a platform like LinkedIn.
So, by the way, thank you for the lead in. There is a system. It's a clarity framework. So step one, the most important, know who you are and represent yourself in less than 10 words. Step two, show up everywhere that way. When you're talking to people, everything evolves around it. When you look at your website, everything is consistently reinforcing the compass that you live in. When you look at your LinkedIn, from your picture, from your headline, from the about, if you go to the bottom of the LinkedIn where you're looking at social proof, from the endorsements, from the recommendations, they all reinforce your CPOP. They all reinforce your clarity. That's step two.
Yeah, I think the idea of creating some uniform approach is so important. I think Steve Jobs did it really well. I mean, whenever you saw him, he always had that black turtleneck. Now, I'm not telling you to wear a black turtleneck. I know my brother used to wear a brown one. It was hilarious. He looked like
I used to wear
ET.
a black turtleneck all the time, but
No, he
yeah.
wore a brown one. He looked like ET because he had a little bit of elongated neck and it was hilarious. A little mullet on the back. It was awesome. Chris, that's for you, buddy. And so, but the idea is having that personal brand identity that whenever you go, like I know for me, I've got these mustard pants and everybody knows wherever I go, I've got mustard pants. And by the way, guys, I don't just have one pair. I have 10 pairs of mustard pants. And why does that make it easy? Because number one, people always know in the crowd, that and the guy with the loud pants. But number two is when I get up in the morning, I don't have to make a decision. It's all the same. And so I'm always showing up the same. I've reduced my chances of just indecision because there is no decision. I'm just moving forward with a system.
Marshall Goldsmith does the exact same thing. For me, it's the fedora. Any of my slides, you've got the Easter egg of the fedora somewhere. What it means though for me, it really is about showing up in a credible way because I'm consistently showing the clarity in which I bring to the table. As a matter of fact, Steve, what's happening now is I now have two audiences. For the first time ever, I'm actually simultaneously serving two different audiences. We all do, but I don't normally haven't talked about it in the past. So I've got the executive coaching with the CEOs of fast growing companies. I'm also working with business leaders. And on the LinkedIn side, my CPOP there is 6 words. Business leaders pursuing abundance with LinkedIn. Now, if I'm going to tell you what that means, it's very cool. It essentially means ignore the stuff that's a waste of time. So use AI to create. This is a great place to create posts. I encourage people to post once a week. Do you need to write the post yourself? No. Have AI create the first draft of the approach, do an update, then post the post.
Yeah,
where
I think the
LinkedIn
idea of AI is, again, I will really strongly encourage to use it, but I will really is strongly encourage that to personalize it. So therefore it's your content that's being personalized from a source. Because if I go out and I go to the library, I mean, I back in the day, you go out, you get the microfiche, and you'd be looking on the microfiche. To anybody who knows it, all the younger generation, the micro what?
they're like, what?
But the idea is you'd go and you'd look at that stuff and you'd find it, and then you'd source and cite it and all this other jazz, and put together your understanding of whatever your hypothesis was. Well, the same thing applies when you use AI. It just happens at a speed that people don't realize. And it happens with just a silkiness that happens with how it comes out, that sometimes what you'll do is you're going to delve into AI, and you know that it's written by AI when it says delve, and you're going to delve into it, and then all of a sudden, it's really not authentically you. And it goes right back to the beginning, that if you're going to use that stuff, use it and make it authentically yourself. And by doing that, you're not being disingenuous to your audience, and that's going to build trust, and it's going to be clarity around who you are, because there's a consistency, because you've gone through and vetted it.
Absolutely. So as an example, I took AI, I essentially created 3 or 4 different prompts. I have my own chat bot that I've created for myself. Relatively easy to do, probably similar to the software you guys have. And I basically crafted the next 90 days of posts. Now, for me, when I say 90 days, I'm posting once a week. So I have those done. Now, before I post, I will have read it, made sure it's consistent. Before I actually post each week, I'm going to say, hey, is there something personal I could add there based on what's happening in my life today? But now we're talking about spending a couple minutes doing an update versus writing from scratch, because the real value is exactly the same as your pre-interview. It's getting to know somebody. The real value is spending time for LinkedIn. It's spending time in LinkedIn Messenger, so that what you ultimately do is when you wish somebody a happy birthday, that happens from the program, and they come back and say, thank you, how are you doing? You actually answer, I'm doing great. There's some things going on in life. I'd love to talk with you and catch up. That is the real value of using LinkedIn.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that goes down to the idea of, the 80/20, the Pareto principle, whatever you want to call it, is that 80% isn't going to make the impact that 20% is, and really own that 20, because that's what's authentically is you. And really that 2% is really where the magic happens. And if you can hone in on that 2% that makes you uniquely you, and really get that message out as part of it, I think that's what's really going to make the impact.
Dude, you're 10X all the time. I like it. Everything you think about it. You 10 above or 10 below. It's great.
Well, but the idea is this is that's why this podcast is called the Money Mindset Mentoring Podcast, is because, one thing I love about podcasting, it's like the conversation we're having today, is that I learn some nuggets that become part of my DNA. It just happens through osmosis. And so it's a wonderful ability to be able to grow. Like, I tell people that you can massively grow your business through podcasting. It's definitely the truth, because it's happened for my business and our clients' businesses. But that's not the thing that matters the most. I have personally grown through podcasting because of the relationships that I've developed, just the robust conversations that I've had with people on and off of camera as a result of podcasting. So I think, when we look at it, it's not me that has made the difference. It's the people that I surround myself with.
Well, that's the coolest thing when people are podcasting and using it as one of the ways to reach out to people. You have fun. If you're actually closing business, you're making money. So in essence, you're getting paid for your education to have fun. Okay, what's wrong with that?
That's right. The only thing to make it better is you choke somebody on the mat. But, maybe I'll do a
You get
podcast joke.
there's something fundamental here we have to talk about, but that's something else.
I'll call it the rolling podcast, and I'll just interview somebody while we're trying to choke each other. Be amazing. That'd be fun. Yeah.
I would not say yes to that one.
It's a very small audience of people who will participate, but a very large audience of people who might listen. Yeah.
Now, it's possible that my son's girlfriend, who is definitely going to the Olympics as a wrestler, so she's doing that. It's possible she would do that.
She would be game on that. And if she's not doing if she's not doing jujitsu now, she will be in the future. All wrestlers eventually migrate to jujitsu.
That's part of that wrestling.
Yeah, it's so good. And you know what? All jujitsu players need to migrate to wrestling. That's it. That's the one thing that a lot of jujitsu players don't realize is the importance of wrestling. I think wrestling is, if you look at the pivot that's happened in that space, you know, the ability for people to open up their mind. John Danner is probably one of the best people to do it, but the ability to say, I'm not going to be closed minded and just focus on this one aspect. I always have to open my eyes to say, how can we improve? And sometimes it's going back to what we stopped doing before, because that's what got us to where we are today.
By the way, that statement was perfect because it applies to everything in business as well.
Yeah, he's one of those minds that I think he has revolutionized the space of jiu-jitsu. And if anybody listens to John Danner from a business perspective, you can revolutionize your business with the right attitude.
All right. So you asked me about the clarity roadmap, and I got through two. So number one, make sure you actually have your clarity. Number two, make sure you show up consistently. Number three, do the types of things that allow people to see you. Doing a podcast, doing one-on-one calls, doing a webinar, doing things where people get to experience you, i.e. they need to get to know you and like you. And then number four, continually build your community. Because to be successful in business and in life, you need to be a community superhero. Whether it's through your church, whether it's through your synagogue, whether it's through your small community group, it's essentially being that person that helps pull everyone together, makes recommendations, comes across as a servant leader, because you then are giving a good legacy and it comes back to you in spades.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Gary Keller said it very well. He says, nobody wins alone. And I think that to me is, and that's a paraphrase, but that to me is so critically important, is that you'll never be the success you want to be or the success that you could be if you're going alone. You're always going to have somebody who's going to be there with you, either as a friend, as a confidant, as a leader, as a mentor, as a coach, or as a client. It doesn't really matter. As a vendor, you're going to have somebody there who's going to help you get to where the goal line is, and nobody wins alone.
It's so funny. We don't think about the world that way, but I've started 20 businesses in Silicon Valley since 1997. Almost all of them have been with somebody else because it's a whole lot more fun.
It is. It truly is. And I mean, you think about anything in life, it's definitely a lot more fun with other people. And that's for the PG-13 version. But the idea.
We'll assume you meant strangling yourself. Got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
There you go. Yeah, totally. I'm talking jujitsu, strictly jujitsu. So when we look at, there goes all my credibility. When we talk about the buckets,
This is a part of get to know you and like
I
you.
gotta get back to the drips.
Okay.
Again, you gotta always authentically be yourself, and comedy, I think, is part of the DNA. If you had one tip to kind of close off our conversation, one tip that you could give in under 30 seconds for somebody who is looking to build credibility, what would be that final tip to give someone?
You have to start with clarity. In less than 10 words, articulate from a servant leader perspective who you serve and their pleasure or pain point.
Yeah, I love it. Mitchell, it's been an absolute pleasure having a chat with you, having you on the podcast, and really talking about what it takes to be seen, what it takes to be heard as a thought leader. Guys, go out and get the book, support him in his fedora. And guys, this is the money. This is the mindset. This is the mentoring podcast. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you on the next one. Thank you, Mitchell.
Thanks, Steve. My pleasure.